Okay, folks, we haven't had meetings in a while, but this is the first official meeting for 2023. We have some folks from GitLab joining us to discuss the adoption of Flux for GitApps. Folks, I don't know if you want to introduce yourselves, want to tell some more things.
Yeah, let's do that. I would love to lead the way for the engineers first, if you don't mind. Timo, Hunter.
Sure.
Mikhail.
Yeah, my name's Timo. I'm a senior backend engineer in this configure group where Victor is the PM of. And yeah, I've been involved in this Flux investigations a lot, where we, looked at it and tried to decide what we want to do. And yeah, hand it over to Hunter.
Howdy, my name is Hunter. I'm a senior backend engineer, also on this configure group at GitLab. Still relatively new to GitLab, been there about 4 months now, but got involved in this discussion in the last couple of months and happy to learn more about Flux and see where we're headed with everything.
Michael, I'm a senior developer evangelist at GitLab. I'm relatively new to Flux, and I'm looking forward to help contribute, promote, anything which comes to mind. Handing over to Victor.
And I'm the product manager leading this effort. And actually, I was following. So I'm responsible for GitLab's integration for more than 2 years now. And when we started our path, what we call the agent for Kubernetes, then Flux v2 didn't exist yet, but I was following your work continuously, basically. And it was a topic always on my mind, whether we should, instead of building our in-house solution, whether we should integrate with you. We looked at Argo as well, but we think they are not really good for something to build upon and something to expand in an integrated way. And I'm very excited to be here and have this discussion with you.
Great, we welcome you in the Flux community. We are very happy you decided on Flux to go forward. Yes, one of the main goals of Flux version 2 was to make it easy for other platforms to integrate Flux beneath. We have couple of integrations with cloud vendors like Microsoft, for example. They ship Flux as a service for AKS and their Arc Kubernetes distribution, which runs on-prem, this hybrid cloud, and so on. But others also do the same, like VMware Tanzu and other platforms.
Yep.
The idea is that we, as a project, we provide the APIs and the machinery, but we don't give you a UI or a full experience of everything. That's up to integrators to figure out how they want to build on top of Flux, all these things. Weaveworks, of course, has its own, the company me and Hide work for. Weaveworks provides an open source project as a Flux UI and an enterprise edition, but also Microsoft does that inside Azure itself and others. So that's we are happy that we see adoption in this space for Flux, because it was one of our goals with the redesign. I want to ask you if the Flux integration, the GitOps future, is something that will be part of GitLab CE or only GitLab E, or can you say more?
Yes, it will be part of the community edition. So we want to, this is the short answer to your question. Now, and I think it actually even affects some of our plans, because I don't know how much you are aware of the GitLab pricing model. We have something called a bio-based persona, which means that everything that targets an individual contributor should be in GitLab in the community edition, should be available as an open source, and the rest is open source as well. But if something is more at the director level or the team lead level, then that's premium, and at the executive level decisions or that strategic level tool choice, that's at the ultimate level. So this is the typical GitLab pricing model. And there's lots around platform teams with Flux, with GitOps actually. That basically means that there is almost everything in the premium level, because there was somebody who needs a platform team. It's not an IC idea. And with this change, we are actually releasing more functionality and providing more functionality with Flux in GitLab to the community as well. So we are changing our pricing strategy a little bit as well. It affects that too.
So, for example, we have many Flux users who run Flux in their homes to set up their, I don't know, IoT, Raspberry Pis, everything. And they usually have also a GitLab, the community edition running there. Will they have the Flux part of the GitLab CE when they will upgrade to the...
Exactly. Even today, for them, this agent for Kubernetes offering that we want to integrate with Flux, that is for them, it's in CE actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Raspberry Pi community has created all sorts of projects around Flux where basically you manage your whole house in a GitOps way.
Yeah.
So
Kubernetes at home, yeah.
They definitely don't use the GitLab runner to change things. They use Flux, which runs on all these edge clusters and so on. Okay, that's great. That's great to hear.
If you don't mind, I actually prepared with telling you how we wanted to approach all this integration. So to give you more ideas on what we want, and even invite you to contribute to that with your ideas. I see that Rob is one of those home labs people. Great. So can I share my screen perhaps? Let's see.
Yeah, I think.
Yes, it works. Okay. So all these, as you might be aware of it, in GitLab, we try to be very transparent. So all of this is in public issues, just like in an open source project you would expect. The first idea we want to do is actually just want to document a recommended Flux setup for GitLab. I don't expect any novelty from your point of view. What we discussed previously, it will be likely with the multi-tenant workflow, because we want to provide a more setup more for even for bigger users that they can go with. And we have to make a few decisions, like whether you use a person access token, a deploy token, and that stuff. But it's only documentation, so it's not a real integration. It's only to get started quickly, so that we can recommend Flux as soon as possible as the recommended GitLab solution for doing GitOps. It's not an integration yet. And then come the two big topics. The biggest one, I think, is what I've heard from our customers, shared users actually, who use both Flux and GitLab. Is one of the biggest issues for them is that they have to manage all the deploy tokens to be able to read GitLab repositories with Flux, and that's what we would like to make simpler. I created this issue today, as you can see, and I'm definitely open to more ideas what we should be aware of or what we should take into consider here. But that's the second topic that I would like us to start working on. And this is already an integration aspect, because it would simplify the Flux experience for GitLab users. And here, for example, one question is, how could we, do you have any recommendations in terms of working with you? Like, let's assume that today we can bootstrap Flux specifically for GitLab, and then it works very well with GitLab. Like, would you recommend expanding that integration? And would it mean that you are open to improving specifically the GitLab experience in Flux, or you would recommend somehow adding it from outside of Flux, these improvements? This will be a topic that I think is both of us have to think about it, and we'll have to kind of discuss this a couple of times.
Yeah, so we provide the dedicated command, subcommand basically, for GitLab, and we also do it for GitHub and Bitbucket. The idea there is that we want to make the whole install experience easier for users, because yeah, we have this generic command which is called Flux Bootstrap Git, where we use your SSH agent and we generate a new SSH key. Then you have to copy paste the public key, go into the GitLab UI and figure out where to make that deploy key work, basically, right? And what the Flux Bootstrap GitLab command does, it basically can provision from scratch everything on GitLab. It creates the repository, it has the deploy key for you and everything. Now, the issue with this approach is what I've seen from GitLab users is that you need to give it your GitLab token, right? Your personal token. Yeah. Now, for teams, that means that key is tied to that token. If that person leaves the team, or I don't know, something happens with this account, or maybe that person isn't even aware of this side effect. If it deletes its token, then all of the sudden Flux connects, yes. Right? So we don't really know what to say. For some users, what they have been doing, they were creating a dedicated Flux user in GitLab, and they were using that token. So that means then all the Flux instances, all the clusters are no longer tied to a specific person, which is great. But on the other hand, is like, you have to create a user. I don't know, you have to pay for it in the enterprise edition.
Yes.
Okay, so it incurs costs and so on.
Yeah. We know this problem. Yes, exactly.
And right. So my question to you is there a way to create some kind of machine account or something like that, which doesn't count as a person because it's not an actual user of GitLab, is more of an automation which should run under a group. It's not an organization, right? It's a GitLab group.
Yeah. Let me share with you one of our ideas. This is something we want to think a lot about before we start any of that work, because we think it's too risky for us at this point. I mean, we are just starting this journey. But one of the ideas was to have a dedicated GitLab source controller, because what we have today, we have this, what we call the GitLab agent for Kubernetes, that actually has two components, one living in the cluster and the other living together with GitLab. And it sets up a bidirectional streaming channel between the cluster and GitLab. And this handles the authentication and authorization for every request, whether it comes from the cluster to GitLab or from GitLab to the cluster. And if Flux could communicate through this channel, then all this key management how is gone, basically. But for that, we...
And this talks Git over gRPC or?
No. I don't know exactly that level of details. I know that it's a gRPC bidirectional streaming channel. I don't know our exact API. I don't know if Timo or Hunter is familiar with this part of our code base.
Yeah, so how it works is that if there's changes inside of GitLab, basically someone pushes, then this Kubernetes, or this cast box there, which you see in the GitLab blob, it basically pushes the changes of manifest files to this HNK. So you have a push communication there, and then HNK installs them into the cluster. So yeah.
I didn't want to interrupt, sorry.
And like one idea would be that Flux will communicate via an additional like source CRD, for example, with HNK, and then basically gets these manifest files. Like that's just one idea we have.
Yeah. So what your agent can do, it can expose, for example, either a Git endpoint or an S3 endpoint, or I don't know, an OCI endpoint. What language did you use to write this agent key?
It's Go.
Go. Okay. So for Go, there are several packages where you can expose an really easy an S3 compatible API for file system, right? And what that means is that when people provision Flux from GitLab, basically the Flux source will not be a Git repo, will be an S3 endpoint pointing to this internal Kubernetes service, right? It will be, the address will be the cluster IP address of your agent key.
Yes.
That's one way to do it. The problem with this is there are several problems with this approach. Have you looked into what Flux notifications, how Flux notification can go back to the GitLab repo and mark commits as reconciled or failed and so on?
Yes.
So if you want that feature in GitLab, Flux needs to talk to a Git repo and get the exact SHA and the branch and everything from upstream, because then how it will, if it has some files in an S3 bucket, there is no, the connection is lost, basically. The Git trace is lost. Flux no longer can tell people, your cluster is at this commit right now, and you've added a new commit, but this one is failing, but your cluster is at this SHA, and this one can't be applied. Once you use an S3 bucket, what Flux will tell you is, the cluster is at this checksum, and this new checksum can't be applied. But checksums have no meaning for end users, and they can't correlate them to an actual commit and so on. Also, Flux trace will no longer work nicely, because if you do a Flux trace, this pod, and what this command does, it goes goes from the pod to the replica set, to the deployment, to the Flux customization, to the Flux source, and tells the user, hey, this deployment is managed from this repository at this branch, and this version matches this commit in the repo, right?
So may I interrupt? I think we start to understand that in this case, we would still use the Flux Git repository or S3 bucket resources. And that's how it would target the in-cluster S3 bucket exposed by agent K, for example. But like, what if we, like, would it be possible to write our own, like a GitLab repository, for example, GitLab repository Flux resource, have that as the source repo for customizations?
At present, the sources API is closed, so only sources that we produce by customization and then we apply to the cluster. We have been thinking in the past about, at the moment, basically a Git repo artifact advertises some API, which then serves for the revision of that file. We have been thinking in the past about making that artifact type a separate entity, so that an artifact in the cluster and then through.
Breaking up for me here.
Yes, for me as well.
I can.
Yeah, we can. I think we don't want to take over all the course, so I just wanted to share with you quickly our plans, and then we can continue discussion, because it shouldn't happen in a single day.
In my opinion, a GitLab source will not solve anything and will make everything worse, because then a GitLab source is no longer a Git repo. We cannot report status. You need to fork everything in Flux, because Flux does not work with a GitLab source. So you have to fork all our controllers, build your own stuff, maintain it. And I don't think it solves anything for you, for GitLab users, because they'll still not be able to, see commit status updates. They'll not be able to use notification controller, because notification controller does not accept events which don't come from the official Git source, official sources, and so on. So it's you are looking at a
That's
hard fork to do this.
exactly. That's why I was asking, because that's what we wanted to. These are the things that we want to learn from you, and thank you for this very quick feedback.
Yeah.
And then,
one second to summarize what I think it can be possible is for that agent to act like a Git proxy. So it will just, replay the same commits as in upstream, and Flux will still have a Git repo there. The branch and the SHA will match. The commit status will work, and so on. It's what you have to do is basically expose that endpoint as a Git endpoint, and you can reuse the same library that we do, which is called Go Git, which can also spin up a Git server. Like we use it as a client to fork, clone, whatever, but it can also be used to spin up a server which serves the files. So if you expose it under the Git protocol and you maintain the same you maintain the same commits and the same history, then everything should work without Flux having to connect to GitLab through the public endpoint, which is rate limited. It incurs costs.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, perfect. Very quickly, another topic that we are looking into, because that's another topic that most of our shared users mentioned, is to have a UI for Flux within GitLab. There are many ideas how to do that, whether it's a separate UI or whether we have sync status by file or anything like that. That's another topic, that how you want to add value on top of Flux for GitLab users. Basically, these were the 3 topics I wanted to share with you quickly, and please give your feedback.
Nice. Yeah, for building a UI over Flux, we offer a couple of things. One is, of course, the status sub-resource of every Flux object, which gives you a deep insight into what's going on. We have extensive conditions that we set there in status. So by just making the status more, show it in the UI in a user-friendly way, then, looking at the JSON and the YAML and have their icons and so on will be a great improvement from the CLI experience. And so that's one thing with the status, where you can tell the current state of everything in Flux. But we also have a good eventing system. And you can, for example, in notification controller, implement your own endpoint for events. And then let's say when GitLab deploys Flux, it can also deploy a pre-configured alert for Flux notification controller, which funnels all the Flux events to your own system. And from there, display them on the UI, maybe allow people to search over them, maybe filter them and do something with the errors. And you can colorate events with tenants, with namespaces. And from there, you can build the whole experience of, of the observability part. And finally, we also expose Prometheus metrics for everything that's happening. So you can build something like graphs inside your dashboards with how long it takes to reconcile DORA metrics. All of that stuff can be, exposed by just having a Prometheus instance that scrapes all the Flux controllers. So there are these 3 things: looking at status of all the objects, listening to events and do things with the events, and finally metrics to show graphs. I think you're muted now.
I'm taking some notes of what you are saying, as I don't have right access to docs.
This will be recorded on YouTube, so you can.
Yeah, I know. I just like to have it as well. Thank you. This is thank you for the very quick feedback on all of that, and I hope that we will be able to work together on and build this thing for the good of both of our communities.
yeah, we look forward to a better integration with GitLab, because we have many Flux users which are using GitLab CE, EE, all these forms, and we want to improve the Flux Bootstrap for GitLab, but we are not quite certain how this will work if it requires that proxy inside, because we want to give people a Flux Bootstrap experience where they don't deploy anything from GitLab, and Flux should definitely run on any cluster and just connect to GitLab like it does with GitHub and any other Git server. So maybe we can add a flavor to Flux Bootstrap GitHub.
One question I would have there, like, we have this agent setup that I just shared with you. Would you be open to set up where Flux bootstraps this agent connection as well, or you would rather leave it to some other approach to have that set up, because that's a GitLab specific component already?
Depends. So if that agent talks Git, the protocol, then we could have some kind of flag in Flux Bootstrap GitLab that will tell Flux to configure a different type of connection to something in cluster. So I'm not saying no to this. We have to take into consideration the UX of the command, right? If you can add some optional flag and make it work like that without breaking anything that we currently have, I'm open to that. It's easier to add things to the CLI and that than forking source control and creating your like
definitely. Yeah. Good. Thank you. As I mentioned before I jumped on the call, I have a very strict stop now, so I'm leaving immediately. You can find me on the Slack channel where I say hello. I stay in there, and let's continue the discussion.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Also on our agenda.
Your mic just cut out again, right in the middle of whatever you said.
Well, I tried to type some of the notes without too many of the details. So at least capture the GitHub issues and things from the chat.
Nice. Yeah. There are so many docs. I've searched for Flux in the GitLab website. There are like lots of issues and docs, and I got lost into them. Thank you for posting these two.
Do we have any action items that we want to note for the GitLab stuff before we move on to other agenda items?
I don't think we need to take any actions. We just wait and see how this evolves.
Okay. Well, it looks like so far the only other agenda item is mine. That's very, very short. I just wanted to clarify when the Flux community meetings are happening, because the schedule is sort of off right now. And I saw, Kingdom, you gave a little emoji reaction in the Slack chat.
I saw that thread. I've never been to one of the community meetings that are on Monday yet, so I'd like to attend whenever you find out. I don't think anyone who goes to that meeting is in the call right now.
Okay.
The meeting on Monday is for the docs website.
I think it's a meeting for Flux community repo maintainers specifically, which I am one, so I should be on there.
Yeah, I've attended 1 or 2 meetings, and usually The topics are new blog posts, what are we going, setting up the announcements every month, but also governance and stuff like that. So, but it's, my understanding is docs and, talks and everything that is happening in the community space for Flux is run by Daniel, and other people attend, of course.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was planning on it.
I got more. Ask him. He will be back next week.
I will. Okay, cool. Yeah, I got a little sidetracked over the last several weeks. So, but I'll be hopping back in. I'll be hopping into those. Too.
Good to see you, Scott.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, we can cut the meeting short. Everybody else is on vacation. We wanted initially to talk about the next Flux release, but we can postpone that for next week, or maybe create an issue on GitHub. What's your opinion, Hide? Are there any big things that need to come in before the next release, which are not yet merged? There are. Okay. Okay, so we can. So there are some things quite urgent. There is a Git CVE. The CLI has a CVE, a remote code execution vulnerability. And while we don't use the CLI directly anywhere, if people have not set up Flux with customized remote bases disabled, like we recommend for the multi-tenancy lockdown. So if they didn't do that and they use remote bases, then the customized SDK does a shell exec to the Git CLI to clone repos. And that means it runs the Git CLI code somehow. So what I'm going to do, what I'm proposing here, I don't know if you agree, instead of doing a release of customized controller with nothing but just rebuilding the container, which feels very odd to me, I can do a release candidate build from the main branch, which doesn't have any new code currently, but I plan to add new features to customized controller before the new release. But I can do a release candidate build from main that will use the latest Alpine, and that should bring the new Git and OpenPGP binaries without CVEs, hopefully. Does anyone here have I don't know, CVE scanners?
I can run a CVE scanner. I don't have any special CVE scanner licenses. If there's a license scanner that you're talking about.
No, I think 3V should. I don't know, does 3V find the Git CVEs now here? Great. Okay, so an action item for me is to trigger an RC build. Then Hide will scan it. And if it looks good, then we can post something in an issue and tell people, hey, if you want to patch these CVEs in your production cluster, you can just do the replacement of the customized controller tag. We had some issues opened by people. It's not about Git, it's about OpenPGP, which has a major CVE, but we are definitely not affected by it because we don't do mine types checks. We are not an email server, whatever. But anyway, people are complaining because, hey, it's a major CVE, it's in Flux image, and we don't care if it's affecting Flux or not. Our policy is we can't run with CVEs in production, right? So for those people, the solution will be until we do the next Flux release, maybe next week. For now, after we do the release candidate, we scan with 3V and we figure out everything is good, they can just use that build.
Solid. Is that a Pittsburgh Steelers hat, Max?
Certainly is. Don't ask me how I got to be a supporter of the Steelers, though. It's a long story.
Not necessary. We're So is that the end of the agenda? Is there anything else we need to cover today?
Not for me. Max, do you have access to that sneak license?
I do.
Cool.
I'm not exactly sure how that license works, and if you can, I mean, I could just try to run it. I'm not sure if it's tied to the Weaveworks or not.
I know that if you're using Docker Desktop, I'm sure some people are using Docker Desktop. You get a limited number of scans with Sneak for free. I don't think there's any Docker Desktop for free at this point for us. I don't use that anymore, but
Okay, and Hidde just said it may work anyway for Flux.
I bought a Docker account, so I can do Docker scan and to use the Sneak thing. Okay.
Yep.
So, okay. Yeah, I have bought Docker because I use it for Flux testing. So cool. Hidde can do trivia. I'll do the Docker thing and make sure we produce an image without CVEs. There is also a thing I've noticed. We are now on Alpine minor release 16, and there is a new one. So maybe we should also bump the version. That should help maybe. Yeah, so we are on Alpine 3.16 and there is a new 3.17. So I'll make a pull request to customize controller. I will bump the Alpine version, trigger a release candidate, then I will post the image on our Slack, and whoever can scan it, please do, and let me know if it's CV free.
About that CVE thing, so we don't usually scan the images like on PRs or on main. Is that something we may want to do going forward? Like regularly scanning?
We scan only the code. So if it's a CV in a Go module, we have Sneak is sponsoring the Flux project, and in Flux CD, the Flux 2 repo, we scan Go mode, which imports everything from everywhere. So basically we scan all our code. And we also have it in package for everything, right? So if there is a CV in one of our dependencies, we know immediately. And this also runs every night. We also have the CodeQL stuff from GitHub, which detects if we, I don't know, take user input as it is and do something with it, and other things. So that's a more advanced scanning. But for images, we look at Artifact Hub, which I think it uses Trivi, that scans all the Flux images every couple of hours. And if you go to Artifact Hub now, you'll see that all those CVs are shown here. Let me give you the link.
Okay, so we basically have something like a process that scans the images already.
Yeah.
You just need something for right now to scan the RCs.
Yeah, we need something right now because the Git thing can be an issue. The OpenPGP one is is not, but people complain about it.
Sure. Yeah.
Due to their cluster scanners. Here is the link. And if you look at this table, you'll see that in customized controller, we do have git lib ska lib curl. There are 2 lib curl CVs, I don't know, whatever. We don't use lib curl anywhere, but it's there. People see the CVs in scanners, and yeah. So even if we don't actually scan our containers with a GitHub action of our own, there is a scanner that runs all the time for all our public images.
And it's not only at a point in time, it's rescanning periodically with the new definition, right? That's what it looks like.
Oh yeah, for sure. It says last scan 5 hours ago.
Okay, great.
So that's very nice feature of Artifact Hub. And it does the same thing for Flagger.
Thanks for explaining that to me.
So I did the Flagger release today. And there is no CVs, no critical CVs in Alpine, but I don't have Git in there. So we don't know for sure if bumping Alpine will solve anything, but we can run Trivia on our own.
I definitely hadn't seen this Artifact Hub scanner before. This is nice. Thanks for sharing that.
And you can also, if you sign into Artifact Hub, you can subscribe and they'll send you emails about it, right? So it's really nice. Any other topic? If not, we can close.
I think that's it for today then.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
See you later.
Thanks. Bye-bye.